So now we come to the last session of the day, which is really an opportunity for us to gather our thoughts and share. But I wanted to say a few things, steal a little bit of your time, and do some PR for CalIT2. So all the aspects of what we heard today are things that we have capacity, capabilities, not only for researchers on campus, but also from the community, startup community in particular, to take advantage of. The discussion about insurance and sensing goes back to our founding days back in the year 2000. Progressive Insurance at that time, I think, was an early adopter of telematic systems in automobiles, and they were in the business of trying to set your insurance premium based on your actual driving style, not the zip code you lived in or your age, gender, and so on. So we've been in discussions about finding ways in which we can sense and do analysis to more precisely quantify the risks. And so this is a discussion that I think applies to a lot of different fields, including what we've spent the day. It's actually been quite captivating. Some of us are researchers in the field. Some of us are interested in the topic. It's been amazing to hear the depth of expertise that has been shared. So on the public service side, I should mention that an organizing principle that we have used in CalIT2, and an element of this is present in every one of these Cal ISIs, is to make sure that all the labs we have are accessible to the community. So let me tell you, our biggest investment on the scientific side is in building nanofabrication facilities. We also have facilities where you can do augmented reality type of stuff, and a great deal of work on communications out there in the field. And we have companies that are in the business of building new sensors, thermal imaging sensors, hyperspectral imaging sensors, that literally work in our labs. And delighted that our Vice Chancellor of Research and Innovation, Corey Picasa, joined us, even if it's the end of the day. This is very much aligned with the overall campus initiative on activating this. If you don't mind me taking you into the weeds a little bit, if you're a startup and you want to build a new sensor to detect fire outbreaks rapidly, you can access our labs while you keep your IP. You know, doing so at a UC is not easy, but we have mechanisms that make it possible for us to do that. You can, in fact, be in this building, and perhaps other parts of the campus too. You could rent space where you could pull your team together. Techno Silva started out here when they first came to the US. Joaquin Ramirez was one of the first tenants of Techno Silva, quite literally across the hallway from where Falco, quite literally, you stepped out and there it is. You had a startup that was taking advantage of the early data gathering that was taking place. When was that? 2010, perhaps? So, and part of the appeal that a startup might have in coming to a place like this is access to our undergraduate students. You heard me say this at the beginning. We have a lot of students who are interested in addressing things that make a difference on a societal scale, and they're very eager to work for startups. You know, the experience that you get building something real and not just homework assignments that faculty come up with, great as that is, really activates students. So it's a wonderful opportunity. Parking is tough on campus, so you know there are some issues you will have to learn to jump through, but it has proven to be very effective. So I talked about sensors, but I also want to mention that on the data analysis side, Ilke is an expert. Dr. Emilia Farkas is here with us in the audience. We went through this exercise, moving, I don't know how many terabytes of data from 25 years of data gathering from about a third of the cameras that are a part of Alert California, all over Southern California, in the cloud, accessible to everybody in the world, in an environment where you can apply different kinds of algorithms. So there is expertise on all aspects of what you're interested in, and I really look forward to hearing from you if you think there is an opportunity here for you to explore. At this point, I'm going to take a short break so we can hear from State Senator Steve Padilla, right? Who has a message for us as well. We started the day with Senator Padilla. So we'll hear from.
I'm State Senator Steve Padilla, and it's my honor to chair the Senate Standing Committee on Insurance. I wish I could be with you today, but I wanted to say hello and congratulate our premier research university in California and all of you for coming together with your diverse backgrounds and expertise to share thoughts, best practices, knowledge, and information about how to really put together a framework for data-driven insurability in times of disaster planning and response. We have a lot of work to do in California. We have to create a broader market to make it more competitive, to deal with how do we capitalize the liability of such a large state with such potential. How do we mitigate risk? And how do we use technology and data to make sure we're getting it right? You're already setting an example with your work and dialogue today to help all of us in California work together to solve our biggest problems. Thank you so much for coming together and for investing time and talent in helping move California forward.
Okay. We had attempted to see if they could spend some time with us, but we have their attention. So I should also mention that all the presentations have been recorded. They will be made available, so we'll have the opportunity to revisit. And I have some ambitious plans on going beyond just the video recording, pulling in the data sets, pulling in the various reports that were described and presented. So this becomes a resource that can, that you could return to in the future. What I wanted to do for this session is really hear from you. What did you learn that was new? Did you uncover some gaps based on, conversations that you've been in? And the larger purpose, of course, is to see if that could be the beginnings of something new, a new direction that we could pursue. So really open-ended. You're not here to hear it from me for the next 30 minutes. But I thought I would kick it off by sharing 3 thoughts that stand out in my mind. I thought it was very interesting to recognize the dollar impact of the increase in the costs and how significant construction costs are a part of that and how much of that is driven by labor costs. I think that sets the right way to think about it. In particular, I was thinking in terms of the trade-off with time. Do you want to rebuild immediately or do you want to rebuild over a period of time? If you can stretch out the rebuilding over a period of time, that might impact the costs. There might be other ways in which one can recognize that that's where the costs are accruing from. Another one that stuck out in my mind, partly because we've been discussing this, is because of the new California code that kicked in this January. I think lots of us that live in homes that are on small lots, which I think is essentially everything within 15 miles of this campus, we're all going to be called upon to cut down trees, right? I mean, I think that's the first thing that's going to happen. I've already seen websites that the San Diego County has, which tells you exactly what kind of trees you need to be cutting down, and there's practically no tall tree that will be allowed. What is the impact of this felling of the trees, not only from the point of view of what it does to the urban biodiversity we have? We are destroying the habitats of birds and bees and whatnot. But what does it do to wind flow, right? I mean, how does it impact the flow of embers? Is this the right thing to do? Do we just all go out and cut down all our trees and we feel that we are in a safer world? Who knows? I wish I had a better understanding, and if there are models that might help address that. The third thing that sticks out in my mind, many years ago we had a project here, actually, which was joint with Irvine on disaster response. This was back in 2006. Data over wireless was not that big a deal. But one of the things that we learned is that you can actually call on citizens to serve as reporters, right? So whether it's a fire that is spreading, there's a lot of people with cameras who are connected, who can provide a lot more information in real time about all sorts of things. Now, not only images, but also weather data. We all have weather stations in our homes. So there is this way in which one might be able to rally a much larger set of sensors in world, in the communities that we are in, that also involves human engagement. And the tools are there. Anybody who lives in San Diego has watch duty on their phone, and I think we've all discovered that it's been a great aggregator of information, including Alert California feeds. So what's the role, not just of models and inanimate sensors, but also people that live in the community, and is there a way in which it can take us? So I'm going to stop there and hope to hear from you, and I will exercise my prerogative and randomly call on individuals who I recognize to share with us what did they learn new, any gaps that come to their mind, call for action, plan for action, a new kind of approach to address things that perhaps we've not been able to address.
You just gave me an idea on labor costs. So again, as I said, before I came here, I was in Altadena and Pacific Palisades.
Can you introduce yourself?
Oh, yeah. So I'm Karen Clark. I was visiting, and I was very surprised at the lack of rebuilding that's been done. And more than that, like there were many more empty lots than there were started buildings. And more than that, of the buildings that had been framed, let's see, they had roofs, like you would go and there would be like 10 houses and one would have 3 people on the roof working. So I was kind of amazed at how few people are actually working on the rebuilding, and I don't know what the cause is of that. But one of the things that I have been thinking is that, and I don't know if there's a place for this at colleges or universities, but we really need more people to go into the trades. Electricians, plumbers, contractors, we really need that. And, for decades, we've been telling people, you need a 4-year college degree to get ahead, to get a good job and, have a good career. And obviously that's true, but do we also want to encourage people who may not be so inclined? And is there a role? I know in Massachusetts, we're doing something like training people how to work on solar technology, or, kind of training people in some of the advanced technology, that's being built here, but can it be people be trained, to build or to do that? I mean, I don't know if anybody else has any thoughts on that, but I don't think people want to wait 5 years for their house to be rebuilt. And, really is, impactful to communities. So I don't know if anybody has any ideas on that. Also, I think construction type, I don't know, I saw something cool on 60 Minutes of 3D printed houses, concrete houses. I don't know if they're more resistant, they're supposed to be less expensive. So I do think this whole idea of construction costs, I don't see anything going down unless we really, do something really unique and different.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think there's a recognition that we need to provide more extensive training to a broader segment of the population. In California, there are specific workforce development programs coordinating with community colleges, which are closer to many people's homes, so they don't have to travel as much. There are efforts, but there are also efforts at picking out certain themes around which you build these workforce development programs. I haven't heard of any around construction, but that's a good takeaway from this conversation. Raymond?
Yeah, I also wanted to, I'm engineered by training and my background is in controls. And so when I hear all the stories about sensors and models, it's all nice and great, but I like to do some control too. And we were talking about earlier, right, during the break, like, if there are embers that are causing all these problems, can we come up with technical solutions that fight those embers, for something simple, automatic sprinklers on top of your roof to, I don't know, God knows what. So I think it's very nice to look at these findings from this workshop and find out, are there innovative solutions to actually actively do something for when a fire breaks out in a community? So I think that's one of my recommendations. Let inventors take a look at this, right? That's one thing. The other thing that I wrote this down, and I couldn't ask this question, but see, I wrote down this here. If my home insurance is raised, is there a way to appeal that based on mitigation, making either the community or the utility liable for those cost increases? In other words, you know, we saw all the models to say, well, if you have mitigation, then you pay lower insurance. And the mitigation could be yourself, your community, or even utility. You know? And if for some reason my insurance goes up and I can't anything do about it because I'm relying on my community or my utility to do that, can I now set them liability or make them liable for my higher insurance? So I think those impacts should also be studied, you know, because the role does not only lie by the homeowner, but also everything around the home, whatever those infrastructure could be, community, utilities. You know? So I think we should also take a look at that, because maybe those will then provide the financial incentives to increase or provide the economics for investment to harden your home. It doesn't have to come always from the homeowner. Anyway, those two remarks. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Ilke.
I was also thinking throughout the day and finding myself confused. Who are we optimizing for? Are we optimizing to reduce costs for the insurance industry or for the individuals? Or are we optimizing to reduce risk? So everything else comes down as cost. So we really need to create our optimization functions and design around them and understand industry policies around them so we can build the right science and data-driven solutions. And I think it's complex. It's really hard to understand these things. So we need more of focused workshops on really defined problems.
Thank you. That's a great observation. You know, I'm reminded of an example from biodiversity, a cautionary tale from the folks who study biodiversity. If the only objective you have is decarbonization, you know, you genetically engineered a tree that grows rapidly, sequesters an enormous amount of carbon dioxide, buy yourself, if that's your only objective, buy yourself thousands of acres in Africa and plant this one species. For sure, you will decarbonize, right? But you will destroy practically everything else, right? Including biodiversity, right? So if you're not clear about what is your objective function, you can do way more harm than you ever intended because you're just going down that path.
So I wasn't here for a lot of the day. So, you know, a big part of me is hoping how to make a complete fool of myself. But hearing the notion to narrow down who are we optimizing for and what is our defined problem in science is this huge push-pull when it actually gets to applied policy of how big do you want to go and how small do you want to go. And when I hear about materials challenges for fire, sometimes they are an exact opposition of what we need to do for wind, for earthquakes. And so there's also this worry about how big should the question go. But I think we also have to think about that as we are thinking about the materials at the very basis of how we need to build safe houses. One, we need to think about who are we optimizing for? And an analogy I think about is how materials really jumped in to work on crashworthiness for cars. And it wasn't just, you know, driving off a cliff. It was also when you hit a pedestrian and when you're submerged in water and how do we reduce fire risk. And it's not nearly as complex a problem, but it was a basic problem of optimizing safety for the occupant. And so as much as I know we have to insure human beings and we need policies and things, I almost think if we can do two things. One, really focus on we are optimizing life for the occupants, the pet occupants, the human occupants, the plant occupants, but then also that, and this is again, I feel like my constant job is 24 hours a day pitching for why we need universities. That ability to kind of think about the materials to the optimizing for insurance costs, which also the occupant cares about, is really kind of a magic thing that happens on university campuses. And it's not that industry can't do it. It's not that minds across every sector are not able to do it. But, you know, sort of the person who's an expert in earthquake resilience and the person who's expert in wind don't exist in the same structures many places. And we have that with our earthquake shake table, which also has a blast facility underneath it that can look at the exact same structures and wind insults on those. And I think we know we are now all in tornado zones, no matter where you thought you were safe from those. We're not all in earthquake zones, we're all in fire zones. And so this multiple disaster preparedness is really kind of, I think, the new way we need to think about things.
Thank you, thank you. Since you weren't here in the morning, I'm going to share with you aloud. Kara, who got her PhD at Scripps, is now at the California Department of Insurance, assessing the appropriate models to use to assess risk to make policy. Tirtha from Irvine, who's been modeling and studying the transport of embers, informs how we build new structures. And I was just mentioning to somebody over lunchtime, this is the deep role universities play in influencing, the robustness, resilience of our communities. We have a critical role to play. That's, I know, self-promotion, but it's important. Tirtha.
So a few things I've been thinking about. So one, to come back to your comment, Ramesh, on the embers, and I know there is a debate going on whether the zone 0 is, to come back to your point, should we have vegetation in zone 0 or not? And this ties into the additional optimizations that we're talking about. But to come back to zone 0, as I mentioned before, it takes a lot to burn a live vegetation because there's a lot of moisture in it. And individual embers are usually not able to do it. It takes a new source of flaming that's happening in zone 0. So it could be a source of new flames that are starting because of other flammable materials, and that if that tree can be, depending on atmospheric conditions, if things are very dry, that tree are more susceptible to creating new embers or new source of additional flaming. So depends on what type of vegetation then, and so leaves that are very thick with a lot of moisture, those are things that should be allowed. But and so to say that you cannot have any vegetation is cutting down the head, so you have no headache. So it's equivalent to that. The second thing is, what about optimization? So for example, also fuel treatment, as I mentioned, so forest thinning, for example, or fuel reduction, that is often done in the community scale or in the wildland regions. So, and that usually also runs into the same contrasting optimization. So if you, because a lot of invasive species, for example, in vegetation, right? So they are usually drying out the forest. So the ecological objective could be to reduce those invasive vegetation and to select for more of the native species which are more ecologically, let's say, suitable for these regions. But then some of these invasive species even are also habitats for important, flora and fauna. So how do you account for that? And the third thing I want to mention, and so these are open questions. What I'm trying to say is I have also these questions going on in my mind that we need solutions to. And the third question I want to think about is, this is probably a thing for the insurance industry as well, which is, I think a lot of as I see throughout the day, a lot of the onus is on the homeowner. But as we have seen many from different modeling works or different other types of research, is wildfire is not only a homeowner problem, it is the downstream end of the problem, but a lot of the factors are coming in at the community scale. So there is a community scale effort, which is the Fire Safe Council. I haven't heard too much of that today, but Fire Safe Councils have been a thing in Northern California for a long time. But in Southern California, apparently we have the first one after the LA wildfires, and new ones are popping up as we speak. So the question is, are the insurance industry and some of the modeling, agencies, let's say, how are we planning to work with them so that some of the solution and maybe some of the burden can also be translated into a scale that is larger than the individual homeowner?
That's a great topic that I think I failed to bring up, but along with individual property mitigation, we do try to, or we do bring into the model things like Firewise, and what's the other one in California that? Yeah, I don't know, is it that or there's another one where it's if you're a county or if you're a town.
Fire risk reduction community.
Yeah, those. So we do take those into account. But sometimes it's very complicated, though, too, because there's a lot of, we actually did a whole session at this on one of our client conferences, because it's very complicated how you get credit, because if you're a town or a city and you can do this, or if you do this, then you can do that, or if you don't do that, you can do that. So there's no kind of standardization. I would say, I don't know if it's possible, but, you know, it might be more impactful if it was more, you know, that this is the way it works, versus there's so many different options that communities can use just to get the, you know, get the rating. So it's almost like you don't want to force communities to do anything specific, but that, you know, except in some, I know they have to do certain things. So to the extent we do bring that into the models, but the credit for that, which we do give, is relatively small relative to, say, for example, defensible space. But I did learn myself, or my company, we learned from firefighters after the LA events that, you know, it is when they're trying to make a decision as to where to attack the fire, they are looking for community, you know, neighborhoods or whatever that are, you know, more mitigated, because then you have a better chance. So it's almost like you get a double credit for that. You know, you get less, you should get, you know, you get less chance for your properties to be on fire. Plus, you're going to probably get more attention, you know, from the firefighters. So we do try to do that, but it's just a little vague now, kind of what the requirements are for that. But, you know, those are things that we've learned are probably even as impactful as individual properties, if not more.
That's great.
Just a question adding to what Karen was saying, and then going back to what Steve said. As U.S. Senator Alex Padilla opened today in his discussion on his proposed bipartisan legislation on the Community Protection and Wildfire Resilience Act, that's a $1 billion legislation, right, to help, you know, hardening homes, et cetera. We're talking about Florida and the large grants that they give. What did you say? Was it $25,000?
I'm not sure.
I mean, it was a huge amount compared to what we're providing in California, for example. And I'll ask this direct question. Is that something that would be put into a model for folks, you know, for modeling for insurance and, you know, insurability? So basically, you know, grant and data-driven insurability, is that something that is a potential for folks? Because if that type of legislation actually gets approved, then that could be something of a potential. And he talked extensively, but also kind of hit all the points, of course, when he opened today. So curious about that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, and all of these things, oh, sorry. Yeah, anything that's being done, be it building codes, you know, mitigation devices, cutting down a tree, which nobody likes to do. You know, all of these things can be factored in. Again, one of the challenges is actually making sure we get that information, or insurers can get it and get it into the model. But, you know, it is becoming more readily available through aerial imagery and AI and all of that. So it definitely can be accounted for, and I think more and more it is being accounted for in the models.
Please.
Okay, thank you. Hello, my name's George Gallagher. I'm with CalIT, which, if you're not familiar with that company, used to be called CoreLogic. We're a business partner here at UCSD. We hire your students and interns and things like that. I understand we have some royalties, so we really want to point that out. Fire safe councils. San Diego County has the most of any county in the state of California. We have 57. These are community-based, they're neighborhood-based. And your question about will it be part of insurance regulation, I think Kara can answer that. It has to be proven that these are financially responsive and could be. It has to be proven before it can be incorporated into any sort of insurance regulation. But really enjoyed this. Looking forward to the cocktail party afterwards.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of other things to discuss here. And I really think just gathering this mindset was really good. And I want to encourage you to continue
Thank
that kind
you.
of work.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Alex, did you raise your hand? No? Okay. Other questions? Yes.
I can ask a question.
Since we are recording it, you would know.
Oh, yeah, you're recording. So I have a question that's come up from this workshop, another workshop that I attended with Judd and Ryan earlier this year, or last year now. One of the problems here I see is a stakeholder problem, right? And in the economics of this is that, Karen mentioned this a lot. It's like, you have a $200 discount for doing these mitigations, right? You might have, say, a $200 discount on your annual premium for doing a mitigation that costs, I don't know, $10,000 or $20,000 or something, right? And at that lowers your individual risk, right? But it might not really pay out if your ROI is 20 years or something, right? And on the other hand, the government spends a ton of money, right, on wildfire prevention, right, firefighting, right, Cal Fire, various local fire agencies, and then if you go into these larger fires, right, when the military intervenes or the National Guard intervenes, right, so you have this huge economic cost versus the cost of mitigation, and then the sort of problem though is that for the government, they can do that directly or that they can intervene via funding mitigation. And if you really tally up from the perspective of the government, right, or larger economic actor, what the costs are to finance these mitigation programs are versus firefighting, and firefighting will always remain, right? But as the firefighter said earlier, preventing that fire from having to, from igniting. My question is, like, what is the outcome, right? Is it beneficial for the government to pour a few $1 billion into mitigation because you weigh it against those costs versus having to actually, still firefighting, but when you're in the situation when you get 4 engines instead of 40 because there's another fire somewhere else, you can stop that from happening. And I guess that's my question for the economists, if any sort of work has been done to sort of tally this sort of, whole system cost and compare it. And yeah.
Judson, you want to use the mic?
Oh, okay.
Corey Judson is in our econ department.
I'm an economist here. Gratuitous self-citation. Bayless and Boomhauer, I think 2021 in the American Economic Journal, Economic Policy, it's about that. So the thing we do on that paper, you should take a look. It turns out it's really important.
Is that the one where you guys quantify the effects of building codes and then the one in the neighbor?
No, this is an earlier paper. So we put together a ton of federal data on Forest Service and Department of Interior agency expenditures on wildland firefighting. And we go through and we think, and those all come out of general tax revenues, right? Those come out of basically your income taxes. We think about for every, we use a big real estate data set, think about all the houses in high hazard parts of the Western United States. That all of that federal money you can basically conceptualize as like a subsidy from the federal government to protect those homes from burning down, right? And so we basically add up the value of that subsidy, and it turns out to be quite large, especially for homes in the highest hazard places. So I think that's what you're talking about, and I agree that's a really important topic.
If you were to revisit the paper 5 years later, after COVID and after the labor shortage and after the spike in material costs, do you think do you think not only would the overall outcomes change, but the magnitude of the outcomes would change?
Yes, I do. And, we wrote that paper before the Tubbs fire. It's hard to imagine now. That feels so long ago. But when we wrote that paper, suppression expenditures were like the most important dollar outcome of of wildfires. So that was in 2017 we had this level shift in property damages. It started with Tubbs fire and then the Paradise fire, and we've just been kind of off to the races. But it used to be that suppression expenditure was like arguably the most important category. And so I do think it would be different now. I also think we would talk a lot more about electric utilities, because the other thing that's happening in California is we have really high and rapidly growing electricity rates that are driven not by cost of energy, but by all the money that the utilities are spending to do mitigation for wildfire, as you know. And so that's another way that we're sort of socializing the costs of wildfire management onto electric ratepayers in that case. And the way that we decide to allocate all those costs around the economy is very important.
Cool. Thank you for that.
This is a great question.
Emilia, Falco, you also had a question? Yeah.
So, hi everybody, I'm Emilia Farkas. I'm a research scientist here at QI. I enjoyed all presentation today, they were wonderful. One thing that I didn't hear about, which I'm curious, it's not my field, but the focus was all on the presentation was on property damage and what's the cost of rebuilding a house. But I'm wondering what research is on the impacts on our health. So I don't know what contaminants go in the soil, in the water, in the air, and that's not just for one house, it's for the entire community. I don't know how much research is on this because I just don't hear about it, So it's kind of either it doesn't exist or it's just in small areas. And it's not just your impact on our health, it's also on biodiversity, so it just everything as an ecosystem.
Very little research. I heard from a lawyer who used to work for the EPA who said he was no longer going to be working for the EPA, that one of the outcomes of the Palisades fire is the burning of irrigation PVC pipes that was imminent in the incinerator, which is close to Altadena. And apparently when you incinerate PCB, you release the most toxic carcinogen into the atmosphere. Right. It's easy to measure, but the consequences are pretty terrible. Yes. There is some work on this because it didn't surface, but we do have access. Again, not doing PR for UC, but I guess I am. The medical record system for UC San Diego, UC Riverside, and UC Irvine is centrally managed. So you actually have real-time data on how many people report in with the respiratory symptoms right after a fire. And you have detailed information on where they live, right? So actually the data is there on the fire, what was released because of hyperspectral imaging into the atmosphere, and how much of it went into whose lungs, and the damage that it's causing. We have the data sets that help you build this much more complex, comprehensive understanding, especially in Imperial Valley. We've been spending time there. They suffer a great deal because of a lot of different airflows. Yeah.
Height advantage here. So for the LA side in particular, right, the reported deaths directly to the fires were around 31, which is shocking enough. The deaths related to cascading effects, contaminated air, toxins, and otherwise are an order or two of magnitude higher, right? And that's quite shocking. So there's this additional cost we've been talking about, the cost for loss of infrastructure, so buildings, maybe disruption of services, loss of life, but there's this environmental cost that we see as well, right? With any of these extreme events, biodiversity damage to or complete disastrous outcome to biodiversity, but also then the emission of greenhouse gases, CO2, or a broad range of different toxins that we don't want. But if you just look at a 100,000 acre fire, right, that releases the equivalent in CO2 to 600,000 cars running continuously, fossil fuel burning cars for a year, right? That's quite shocking. So if you look at the 2020 fires, where we had, just over 4 million acres that burned in California, that's close to 4% of the state that burned, right? 4%, that's a crazy number. But that means 24 million cars were suddenly put back onto the roads for an entire year running nonstop, right? So there is a cost to that, not just us locally, but planetary scale. Now there are the carbon offset credits, right, that are out there that have been traded between EV manufacturers and vehicle manufacturers and otherwise. So the question is, are there other models that would allow sort of preemptive action to be rewarded, right, through these CO2 credits, right? You mitigate the risk for your community for fire. The fire models would say if nothing has been done, this would be the extreme type of fire spread, would have liberated this much CO2. Changes have been made. Now the models say it's less. There's a differential, right? Could there be a pot of money, resources somewhere, right, that could be dipped into? The same for firefighting efforts or technology, right? This event was prevented. If we had done nothing based on a historical record, this would have turned into a 100,000 acre fire costing $1 billion, right? if there's this tiny fraction of this that can go to prevention, to technology, right, mitigating future events, right, one event prevented can pay for the long run for fundamental research, technology, development, operations.
Very well said. Tirtha?
Just a very quick comment on that. So usually some of these carbon credit programs at the end up planting trees as to offset that carbon, and then eventually those are the same trees that go up in flames. So in Canada, for example, a lot of the logging companies, they plant trees. They employ college students actually during summer to spread seeds 6 feet apart. And in the last few years, the massive fires in Canada, these are the trees that have been burning. So there was an op-ed in the New York Times, for example, that somebody who did that work as a student long time ago now saying, I'm feeling guilty because I did that work because it was a good intention. Now we are seeing all that effect. And we still don't have a way to quantify the carbon release rate properly, actually, for our wildfire events. Sensor limitations.
Okay, on that note, it's 4:30. Time for the reception and for further conversations. It's been extremely valuable to me, and I'm going to say for probably every one of us here to spend the day hearing from multiple perspectives. I think we achieved exactly what we wanted to achieve, bring lots of different voices to this conversation, and use this as the beginning of something new. Thank you very much. Hope to see you outside and continue the conversation. Thanks.